In 1803, the United States doubled its landmass in a single day. The price for half a continent was exactly $15 million. The young republic was boxed in, ending abruptly at the Mississippi River. For Western farmers, that foreign-controlled river was their only highway to the world. Everything had to pass through New Orleans. Without that single port, America's entire interior economy would stall. Control of that bottleneck was becoming a crisis. Spain had recently signed a secret treaty to transfer Louisiana back to the French Empire, putting the aggressive military force of Napoleon Bonaparte right on the American border. A French New Orleans put the American interior at the mercy of a global superpower. If Napoleon closed the river, Western states would be economically strangled, creating a pressure that threatened to fracture the Union's stability. But the deal that followed wasn't the result of American planning. It was triggered by a conflict in the Caribbean. In the French colony of Saint-Domingue, what is modern-day Haiti, a massive and organized slave revolt was successfully dismantling French rule. Napoleon needed Saint-Domingue as a supply base to defend his North American holdings. When the revolution decimated his army, it effectively severed his logistical capacity to hold New Orleans. Pressure was also mounting at home. France was on the edge of a massive, expensive military conflict with Great Britain. Napoleon decided he could no longer afford to defend his American territory. He moved to liquidate the land immediately to fund his upcoming wars in Europe. The United States' greatest territorial expansion was the accidental byproduct of a Caribbean revolution and the shifting needs of European warfare. President Jefferson had originally authorized James Monroe and Robert Livingston to spend $10 million solely for New Orleans and the Floridas. Instead, the French offered them the entire Louisiana Territory for $15 million. It was a staggering volume of land, priced at roughly 4 cents an acre. To put that scale into perspective, the modern borders of Great Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and Portugal can all fit inside the territory the United States acquired in that single deal. But the offer created a dilemma. Jefferson was a champion of a strict, literal interpretation of the Constitution, which did not grant the president the power to buy land from foreign governments. Despite his own legal trepidations, Jefferson chose to proceed without a constitutional amendment. He decided that the long-term security of the nation was more important than sticking to his foundational legal principles. The deal faced immediate opposition from New England Federalists. They feared that the new Western states would eventually overwhelm their political influence, and some leaders even threatened to secede from the Union. The political survival of the treaty was remarkably thin. In the House of Representatives, a vote to deny the purchase failed by a margin of just 2 votes. Once the purchase was secured, Jefferson commissioned the Corps of Discovery. He sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to find out exactly what the United States had just bought. For 862 days, the expedition mapped the terrain and documented new species, surviving a grueling crossing of the snow-capped Continental Divide. By reaching the Pacific Ocean, the expedition established a physical presence that would become the basis for future U.S. legal claims in the Northwest. Their journey physically locked in the United States' trajectory as a Team Ocean continental power. This expansion came at a heavy cost to the people already living there. The purchase began a century of systemic displacement, forcing dozens of indigenous nations off their ancestral lands into this new territory. The new land also became a political battleground. Every mile of territory raised the same volatile question: would the institution of slavery be allowed to expand westward? The struggle to maintain a balance of power led to fragile agreements like the Missouri Compromise, but these legislative fixes were only temporary. The disputes over this land eventually led to the violence of Bleeding Kansas, and 15 years later, the outbreak of the Civil War. The land deal that secured America's future as a global power also carried the disputes that nearly destroyed the Union. Today, the territory from the 1803 purchase encompasses 15 states. Their combined modern GDP and agricultural output are essential to the global economy. Comparing that multi-trillion-dollar output to the original $15 million price tag shows a staggering return on the initial investment. The 1803 treaty provided the land and resources that allowed the United States to expand across the continent, though that growth was built upon deep human and moral concessions. If you had been there in 1803, would you have seen the Louisiana Purchase as a brilliant investment or an impossible risk?